back to the Get Ready for 2021 show. I'm really excited today because we're going to be talking about new markets and new niches that you can approach in 2021 to increase the revenue within your property. I am joined today by Kerry Williams. Kerry Williams is an absolute legend and an expert. She is head of the Accessible Group, and they help people with disabilities get into accommodation. Welcome to the show, Kerry.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Fantastic. I'm really excited about this topic. We've only met recently. You've told me that you run a group for people with disabilities to help them find accommodation. I would love you to tell us a bit more about yourself, where you're from, how you got into this particular space, this particular niche, and then afterwards we'll talk about all the opportunities that are out there for 2021.
Okay, so I have a digital marketing and sales background. The reason why I got into this area is about 6-7 years ago. I used to have my mum travel with me on holidays, and so we had to find wheelchair accessible accommodation for her. It was one moment in Tasmania where no matter how many times I'd asked the right questions to make sure it was in fact accessible, when we got there was no way Mum could have a shower. And she basically said to me, look, it's okay, I'll just hand wash for the next week. And it was one of those light bulb moments that got me thinking, you know what, something should be done about this. There are, we've got baby boomers growing, more mature, will be needing more accessible features. We've got people that have disabilities. And so I actually was building a holiday rental in Barwon Heads in Victoria at the time, came back and spoke to the architects, and I said, look, I want to build this to be wheelchair accessible. And so we did. And for the first 3 or so years, I wasn't quite sure what to do. And we got we started going, okay, let's see, how can we attract these followers? And before you knew it, the holiday rental, just had 80% occupancy, and people with disabilities, so that's how we started. So further to that, we had a lot of people asking us, do you know of anywhere else around Australia that's accessible? And that's how Accessible Accommodation was started.
So it was people that were coming to visit you, that had disability, that needed accessible accommodation. They said, hey, do you know of any other places where we could stay?
Yes. Yeah. And I realised, you know what, there is really no sort of singular area where you can find accessible accommodation around Australia. And so the website was born. We launched February 2019, and by November we were finalists in the New South Wales Tourism Awards and then the Travel Weekly Awards. So obviously the travel industry accepted and warmed to what we were able to do, and certainly the followers that came from it love that opportunity of being able to find properties around Australia.
So one of the things that I actually found when I first met you was that, or one of the first things I did was I jumped onto the big OTAs to check if there is accessible accommodation and what that means, and whether there's actually a filter in there that you can actually search by those different options that you might need. And I just found that it was quite lacking. So it's quite clear that there was an opportunity in the market for you to create this resource and a bit of a business as well at the same time. What do you think of sort of the different options that are out there at the moment of actually finding a place for someone that needs that has special needs?
Well, we've got 130 properties around Australia, so there's they are out there, and also with new builds for accommodation providers, the regulations now require them to have X amount of percentage of accessible rooms, and so that's also necessitating accommodation providers needing to discover how they can attract that market as well.
Yeah, okay. And so what are the rules uniform across the country, or is it state by state at the moment?
Both, actually. But yeah, so for example, a gentleman contacted me last week. He's built 8 units. He now has to have at least one of them to be accessible. And initially he thought, well, it's just going to be sitting vacant. I people without disabilities, they're not going to want an accessible bathroom, etc. And he didn't realise that there is 19% of Australian population have a disability of some sort. So there's a lot of financial sense to be considered, for this target market, which is the fastest growing market. Using one example, in the total travel market of people with disabilities globally is equal to that of the Chinese travel market. So if you think of in Australia, how many millions of dollars our government, in particular, and Tourism Australia, spend attracting that market, that we have a ready-made population around Australia where 19% of our population have a disability of some sort. Then add to that, you've got baby boomers who don't consider themselves disabled, but they would love to be able to have a step-free shower, a comfortable chair to sit in when they're having a shower, etc.
Do you know how much more of the market that would make up? Just to put you on the spot.
So 25% of the Australian population are baby boomers. Interestingly, though, they hold 52% of the nation's wealth. So that's something to really take into account, that baby boomers have a very, very strong say in the spending capacity and in the accommodation and tourism market. That's a really good consideration to also take into account.
Okay, so we're actually looking at two different avatars. So if we're going in and doing our marketing, we're doing our outbound marketing, and we're going, okay, there's these different profiles that we're looking at in terms of, the old get a piece of paper and draw the person who you think is going to be coming. So
yes.
We've got baby boomers, and now we can probably make some adjustments to our property to cater to that market in a more effective way.
Yes.
And to speak more to some experience, like to improve the experience.
Yes.
And then you've got the other side of the market, which would be one for people with disabilities.
Yes.
Is there any others that I'm missing there, or any kind of breakdowns within the avatars that I just wouldn't understand at this stage?
No, that's pretty much it. I guess that keep it simple, and that there's two very, very exciting markets. The baby boomer market in the last 15 years, that's not new news. Industries have really focused on that category because they are so cashed up. But the people with disabilities market, and when I'm saying disabilities, I'm not just talking about wheelchair users. I'm talking about someone who would use a walking frame or a cane. So there's all types of mobility challenges.
Yeah, fantastic. And then the supply and demand. So what I really want to get down to, like, we will go into how and what you need to do, which I think is going to be immense value, but let's understand what the numbers are before anything else. So supply and demand, is there enough stock out there to meet the demand that's there? I mean, from what you're saying, we can see the demand is going to increase with time, but is there enough stock and options for people, or is it like the markets just need to catch up?
Okay, so I might just fill you in on a really what most accommodation providers don't know. With the Royal Commission recently getting people out of aged care facilities and into permanent accommodation, there's a real push at the moment. Major organisations are building permanent specialist disability accommodation. Now, the reason I'm raising that is before that's built, those people have to stay somewhere. And in fact, almost 40% of our business, and that's only in the last 4 months when we started doing this part, almost 40% of our business now is in finding what we call short to mid-term stays. So if someone's waiting for a specialist disability accommodation, they might need a 6-month booking. Now, having your room, if some providers might have an accessible room and they're not sure what to do with it, well, there's potential to have someone stay for 1 month to 6 months. The other thing is the NDIS within some of the plans that each of the participants have, they can have up to 28 days respite built into their plan, and so that's where they have assistance in accommodation. So, yeah, hopefully those facts might just that's apart from just wanting to take a holiday.
Yeah, sure. So, and then in terms of, so there's these new opportunities that are sort of coming up in terms of the demand is increasing, and there's more, I guess, legislation coming in, and there's more sort of power to saying that there will be that demand coming. In terms of rates, are we going to have to discount our rates to cater for people that are staying for longer, or is it actually, hold on a second, the opportunity is far greater than you would imagine because you can maintain quite high rates because there's not enough supply and not enough stock out there for these sorts of things.
Yeah.
Do you know much about that?
There isn't enough stock out there. For example, we've got 18,000 followers, and there are many locations around Australia where we just simply don't have sufficient stock or any stock. So it is very regional based. But perhaps I might just sort of just highlight a couple of key learnings that I had when I had my own holiday rental. So as an accommodation provider myself, and that's also now been transposed into the outcome for we've nearly been running 2 years now, as to why financially it makes sense. So apart from what I've explained, people with disabilities are risk averse. And what that means is the stay duration is longer. So using my own property, for example, I was competing against all the Airbnbs in my area at Barwon Heads, and having to discount and really having them only stay on the weekend. When I started focusing on the disability sector, my weekdays were filled. My June, July, August, which was usually where it was vacant and I might come down and use it, is filled. So because people with disabilities tend to prefer to travel on the quieter months. So you can do a bit of a mix in January where, you're at a peak rate and that helps pay, your bills, your big bills for the year, and having your current market. But then what do you do in the winter times? How do you try and have people stay on it? I mean, usually it's very unlikely. Doesn't always happen actually, is that our bookings usually about 4 days or longer. So where in my property, I went from 2 nights on a weekend to 4 nights midweek. So
Wow.
my profitability improved because they were staying longer. So therefore my changeover cleans were less. The other thing that's really interesting, and particularly for if you've a hotel or a B&B, that we've found is they book multiple rooms. So whereas your traditional guest might book a room in a B&B, people with disabilities will travel with a carer or a support worker, and so they need their own room or their own apartment. So, for example, where we have some of the larger organisations where they have serviced apartments, one apartment will be the accessible room, and that's accessible apartment, and that would be booked for the person with disability. And the next door would be the one for the support carer. Some of them need 24/7 support. So then you have 2 or 3 carers. So there's 2 or 3 extra rooms. So there's that sort of thing. So yeah, hopefully that sort of helps you a little bit.
Yeah, look, and I think that one question I did want to, and look, I don't want to get into controversy over this, but I just want to ask the questions that I think that people might think. And if I have accommodation and now I've gone down the accessible path, is there risk in terms of on the other side of alienating people that don't need accessible accommodation, or they say, oh, I don't want those sorts of features? Is that a thing, or is that not a problem at all?
That was the first thing I thought of when we were building our house. I thought, if I want to attract that market, but I don't want to potentially miss out on my current market, which is 80% of the population. And so there are things you can do in terms of the way you construct or renovate or refurbish a property that has discrete accessibility. So, for example, you need extra wide doors. Now, no one, whether they able-bodied or not, are going to notice that. A shower chair, you don't need to have a wall-mounted shower chair that you see in traditional accessible rooms. You can have a freestanding shower chair. Grab bars, you can now, I had ours powder coated so that it matched the tiles, so it was discreet. Toilet chairs, you don't have to have that big cumbersome wheelchair style toilet chair you see in a disabled bathroom. You can have a standalone standover shower chair, and that's $60-$80 from Bunnings. Using that toilet chair. So using the shower chair, for example, $60-$80 at Bunnings for a freestanding shower chair versus $1,400, because I had to look at retrofitting it, of having a wall-mounted fold-down seat, and which I thought, okay, I'm not $1,400. Wow, that's a lot of money. So that's a really cost-efficient way to do it. Yes, there are ramps and step-free access, of course, but you can do it discreetly. And I think
so you're saying that within the property, it's quite reasonable to have the right level of access.
Yes.
But aesthetically, for it not to be too jarring for people that don't need to have those requirements.
Yes.
And then also, so we've kind of got over that potential hurdle, and then we're also saying it doesn't have to cost the world to make these changes that could be quite significant, and then go from not being accessible to being accessible.
Correct. So with accessible accommodation, I'll refer to that because it helps explain a little bit better. There are 3 levels of disability. So the first one is assisted walking frame or cane user, and that's where our baby boomers often use. So they would love the convenience of a step-free shower, and the convenience of a shower chair. The next one we have is assisted as independent wheelchair users, so they can self-transfer. They don't need an electric bed or hoist. And then the third level is the one that needs the electric bed or the hoist. Just because a property is listed on accessible accommodation does not mean that they have to meet all 3 standards. So there are some properties that, going back, this is probably the best way to explain it. The biggest compliment I have received for my own property is that when people say, I didn't even know it was accessible. And I cater to the highest level. In my garage is the electric bed, is the hoist, is the shower commode. And so those are what I can provide, but I only chose to do that because I've been doing this now as an accommodation provider for 3 years, and I realised that I needed to take it to the next level. I've even got a beach wheelchair now, so that you don't need to be to that level. There are a whole lot of the other population who just want that convenience, like I talked about, the shower chair and step-free access.
And I feel so naive. The 3 standards or levels that we just talked about, are they documented? Is that clear? Is there an industry standard?
Okay, so there's no industry standard. There is government standards for when you are building a property as to how high the grab rail should be and all that sort of thing. What we did is we took, and I did a focus group before we launched. So we took my several years of running an accessible property, and every single question anyone could ask. We had a focus group who we found out what is it that they want to know. And so each of our properties, they fill out a very extensive listing form. And the reason they do that is that, going to time saving, you're better off by having every single possible question covered. By the time they're ready to contact you, they're ready to book. They're not ready to ask you about, could you tell me how wide the doors are? Go and get the measuring tape, go down, do that. That 10 minutes takes you away from answering the phone and taking a potential booking. So that's how we did it. So we actually had to create our own rules, because there's no industry standard apart from
your accommodation specifically as well.
Yeah. Correct. Yes.
Okay, so that's fascinating. So, have you guys certified that, or have you got any badges and stamps or that sort of thing saying we are this or that, or sort of some sort of differentiation, so that as a user or as a guest trying to make a booking, I'm like, yeah, no, that one's going to be fine for me. That one's not going to be fine for me, or I might give a call and follow up and find out more information.
Yeah, apart from trademarking and all that sort of stuff. But basically those are the 3 very easy searches, and within our website, you can search by those 3 criterias. We've spent a lot of marketing on explaining those three criteria as well to make it easier for guests to be able to follow that. And so we classify each property accordingly.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so I always like to do this. I always like to sort of rewind once we've kind of got all through, because there's just so much information which is pertinent. And I like to get into the shoes of my accommodation hosts and to sort of say, okay, so they're sitting here listening to us go, oh yeah, this is also great. And just balancing the amount of time it's going to take to do all these things and the opportunity, and then changing the marketing and then creating that journey in that path. So I'm an accommodation owner. I don't have any accessible options at this particular point in time. I'm thinking, all right, I should, this sounds like a great idea. The marketing side, I'm going to be comfortable with. I'll do some changes to my website and to my messaging to say, yes, we now have accessible accommodation. We might even use your standards and just say, hey, we are one of these three options. That would be the marketing part sort of covered.
I guess what I've done is my website for my own property is catered to and targeted to your everyday person, whereas my accessible listing on accessible accommodation is where I streamline. So you don't necessarily have to blanket say accessible. You can sort of target your marketing in that way, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, and then so we'll do some adjustments there, and we can kind of figure that out, and probably contact you and say, hey, what are some tips and that sort of stuff. Then we go, okay, now, so I don't have anything. Now I want to get started and I want to create the first few steps. How do I know, first of all, whether it's even worth, or whether it's possible or not possible? And then what do I do in terms of the next steps to see what the budget's going to be and how much it's going to cost me to do to get into this particular market?
Okay, so if you're starting from scratch and you don't have, say you're building a property, would that be the right example?
No, I would be someone that's already got properties that are established, that they're not building.
Yeah. Okay. So there are some basic requirements such as door widths and ramps and all that sort of thing. So that's where the starting point would be. The next point would be, I've got a lot of, for example, I put together tips to make it more accessible. At the end of the day, I think probably the easiest thing is to hire a wheelchair from a pharmacy. It's $15, and put yourself in that chair and go around your accommodation and see if, declutter. There's things like that could be done. So, yeah, I guess it's, if you're wanting to attract that market is step one is, if you're going to do it properly, don't go, oh, I'm not sure, I might, otherwise don't do that. My suggestion would be to look at what you're prepared to do in marketing, look at your property, and you can have advisors to come and look at it, or I have someone who does assessments for me as well. And then once you've done that, you go, okay, I'm really going to do this. Then it's things like hiring a wheelchair is actually, I know it sounds silly, but it's actually the most easiest way to find out what you should do.
Whether you can or you can't. So if we're good with getting in and out, so the ramp, and if we're good with the door width, let's say, would everyone need to extend their doors as standard, or does it vary, or is it?
Yeah, most properties, so it's 81 wide doorways, and then hallways at least 90 would be, that's the basic. Yeah. And quite a few properties already are like that.
Right, okay. But so we're saying that older properties probably would need to open the doors a bit more.
Yeah, they might do, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so then when we look at that, we go, yep, cool, the doors are good. Then we go around and we look at all the different areas. And let's say we don't have to do any structural changes because we got lucky and the doors are wide enough. What kind of extra costs are we kind of talking about to get going?
Okay, so questions are: Can I get on and off the loo in and out of the shower and on and off the bed. I'll use an example. Bed risers. They rise the bed clearance by about 12 centimetres. That means that someone can hire their own hoist to glide under that bed and to lift them out of the bed and into the chair. So that's a $24.95 investment that 42% of our followers need.
Mm-hmm.
The freestanding remove and put in when needed shower chair, toilet chair, etc. Rubber ramps, they're $38 at Bunnings. Have you got a little lip threshold to get out to the deck? So there's lots of little cost-effective ways to set it up. As I said, declutter, because whether it's a wheelchair user or a walking frame user who's at risk of fall, the less stuff there is. But then don't make it clinical. There's so many bathrooms that are built and they look like you're in a hospital. You wouldn't even know you're in a hotel or a B&B. You can make it look gorgeous. It doesn't have to be clinical.
Beautiful. So, are we saying that it's realistic? If for this particular example, like we're saying, we don't have to change the door sizes; they can get in. So under $1,000, under $500, we can do enough little changes to then say, actually, we can do this.
Yeah. I'd say look, without looking at the property, I'd say under $1,000 comfortably. And then the next step is what you're going to invest in marketing to get the brand awareness out there.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then that part is where you kind of fit in and you've got those different solutions, which is great. So it is an option for quite a few people. If you're building new, of course, that's a different sort of thing. And it's something that for me, it just seems like a no-brainer. I think it's retrofitting is the part where there's a lot more opportunity for people to make those changes. Think, oh, hold on, there is a new market that we can appeal to. And as you said, this market, the beautiful thing is if you start thinking about it now and you start making those changes and doing what you need to do, the market's getting bigger. It's not getting smaller. So you're future-proofing your business for the long run by having more options. And then if you are tied on cash or if things are, or if things change again and things like that, you go, hold on, I've got an awesome option to be able to cater to a market that I just hadn't thought about before, and now it's actually there.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a couple of things I've probably forgotten to mention. The first is if one in 5 people in Australia has a disability, they're not going to be travelling on their own. They're going to be bringing family members with them as well. So you're not only attracting that market. There are things such as glamping. There is a fantastic builder who builds glamping tents, and she's introducing wheelchair accessible glamping. And I've forgotten the last one. There were 3 things I thought I needed to tell you. Anyway.
That's okay. That's why we record this so I can edit it out.
Yeah.
I did that with Nick, actually. There was a bit where the camera started losing focus and he's just sitting there waving at the camera. I was like, oh, cool. I can just do the thing. So don't stress. Okay. So I think we've covered an awful lot so far in terms of all the I think there was different things that we took there. Okay. So we've covered an awful lot. I think that there's a lot to be learned. One is that there are markets that maybe a lot of people haven't thought about. Maybe a lot of people have, but now what we're trying to say is give you guys some tips as to how you could get started and to get into this particular place. Kerry, I imagine that you have some resources that people can get from you to sort of get themselves going or start a conversation. I know that we've got a Facebook group, and then in there people can ask questions as well. Is there any way that they can reach out to you to get more information or to your team? What would be the next step in terms of asking for help?
Okay, well, I've got a sort of handy brochure that I put together, and I'm more than happy to share it with your followers. If they just pop an email through to me at Kerry at theaccessiblegroup.com, Kerry. And yes, happy to chat. If they're not sure, if they want to learn a little bit more, they can give me a call on 0477 103 808. And yeah, there's it's certainly food for thought as to not just what we're doing now, but what are we going to be doing in the future as accommodation providers, and how we can try and reduce competing against so many other Airbnbs, for example, out there.
Yeah, beauty. You're wonderful. I really enjoyed talking to you. What I love about the guests that we're talking to at the moment is there's just so much experience, there's so much knowledge, and so many different ways of thinking about things that it's really heartening and enlightening. I'm looking forward to working with you, talking to you more over the next year or 2 years or however long it may be, and to continue this journey, because I think it's a fascinating one. I think that from a pure dollar point of view, it's amazing. But I think that the other side of actually helping other people out is something that I'm all about. And like there's that satisfaction that would come with it as well. Just going, you're doing the right thing. You're actually going to help people out to make their lives a bit easier. And it does make a huge amount of difference for people. Thank you so much, Kerry. Is there anything else, any final notes, or are we good to go?
No, good to go. All good. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.